What if the world lost oxygen for 5 seconds? Imagine, for a moment, that the very air surrounding us, the oxygen that has sustained life for billions of years, suddenly vanished, not for hours, minutes, or even seconds, but for just 5 fleeting seconds. It's a premise as dramatic as it is brief, yet in those 5 seconds, our world would undergo transformation so profound, many would scarcely believe its impact. The disappearance of oxygen, so ubiquitous and often taken for granted, would reveal its true constant in our existence. Consider now, as you breathe in and out, what those 5 seconds might hold. The world as we know it is painstakingly dependent on oxygen. Comprising roughly 21% of Earth's atmosphere, it is essential for combustion, respiration, and the very molecular stability of the planet's surface structures. If, in a moment, every molecule of oxygen were to vanish, chaos would unfold with a suddenness that defies our imagination. For our bodies, the effect would be immediate. Humans can survive several minutes without breathing, but the sudden loss of ambient oxygen is not the same as merely holding one's breath. Our blood, tissues, and organs rely not only on stored oxygen, but also on the continual availability of oxygen from the air. In the absence of such, every single breath would yield nothingness. The sky, which owes its blue hue to the scattering of sunlight by oxygen and nitrogen, would instantly fade into black. Above us, the sun would shine through an eerie, darkened firmament. Within that first second, anyone outdoors would feel the burning touch of solar ultraviolet rays. The planet's ozone layer, composed entirely of an unstable triatomic form of oxygen, would instantly vanish. In its absence, nothing would protect us from the sun's harshest emissions. Many would feel an unexpected sunburn. Though it would all happen so quickly, the danger would scarcely register before oxygen returned. The silence would be overwhelming. Sound, that great conduit for communication and warning, requires a medium like air to travel. With all oxygen molecules gone, the density and pressure of the atmosphere would plummet. The air would be thinner, and with that drop, sound would nearly cease to exist. Conversations, cries, and the ever-present hum of civilization, cars, engines, even the whisper of wind, would simply stop. All combustion would halt in an instant. That forward motion of every car, bus, plane, or ship, sustained by the oxidizing of fuel, would be abruptly interrupted. Every internal combustion engine would stall, jets would flame out, and any vehicle reliant on fire, flame, or spark would come to a jarring stop. Those in flight would be in grave danger. A 5-second window is enough for airplanes at cruising altitude to experience engine cutoff and rapid depressurization of the cabin. Fires, for their part, would be snuffed out. Forest blazes, house fires, even the tiny flames of candles and lighters would vanish. The world would be plunged into an unnatural twilight, as all forms of flame and light requiring oxygen would cease. Beneath the ocean's surface, marine life would be affected in unexpected ways. Water, the sum of hydrogen and oxygen, would remain. But the dissolved oxygen that aids the respiration of fish and other aquatic creatures would be gone. 5 seconds may not cause immediate die-offs, but the sudden deprivation would cause panic and distress among sensitive aquatic species. At the molecular level, greater surprises await. The very structure of concrete and stone is bound together by oxygen atoms. In its absence, buildings, monuments, and structures would begin to crumble, if only for an instant. The sand beneath our feet, silicon dioxide, would turn to loose sand grains, unable to bind themselves together in oxygen's absence. Metals would lose the protective oxide layers that shield them from corrosion, if only for a moment, exposing fresh surfaces to the environment as oxygen returns. Human biology, so precisely attuned to the rhythm of breath, would respond in shock. Lungs, denied oxygen, would send urgent signals of distress to the brain. The hemoglobin in our red blood cells, designed to bind and release oxygen molecules, would suddenly have nothing to transport. Our bodies are built to withstand short periods without fresh air. People can hold their breath for minutes, but the aerial shockwave of losing all oxygen would spark pandemonium at the cellular level. Many may faint, and a sense of suffocation would pervade even the healthiest of individuals. though only for an instant. Those with respiratory illnesses would be especially at risk, as that brief deprivation might trigger panicked breathing and stress responses. Athletes, animals, infants, no one would be spared the absolute stillness that oxygen's absence would bestow upon the world. But perhaps the most shocking impact would be seen and heard in the built environment. The drop in atmospheric pressure would be equivalent to a sudden elevation change, akin to being transported instantly from sea level to the heights of Mount Everest. Ears would pop, eyes would sting, and many would feel disoriented and off balance. The oxygen component in the air is also largely responsible for supporting the atmospheric weight that presses in upon our bodies evenly from all sides. Its loss, even for a moment, would send reverberations through every structure, human and natural, on the planet. Plants, too, would feel the absence. Though they produce oxygen via photosynthesis, they also require it for processes like respiration. In those 5 seconds, photosynthesis would grind to a halt, leaving plants temporarily stunned. In forests, on fields, and in the deepest jungles, life would collectively hold its breath. As oxygen returned, the world would resume, but not without scars. Those in moving vehicles might still crash from engine stalls. Pilots and air traffic controllers would face emergencies as planes lost thrust and cabin pressure. Fires snuffed out would remain extinguished, posing risks in sensitive environments like hospitals or laboratories where continuous flame is needed. The sudden resurgence of oxygen could ignite new blazes at the sites of electrical sparks or fuel leaks, as materials freshly exposed by the absence of protective oxide layers caught fire. People might collapse or experience transient health scares as their bodies adjusted to the sudden dip and return of oxygen. Electronic equipment, sensitive to pressure changes and reliant on oxidation reduction processes, might malfunction or reset, causing disruptions to communication and emergency services. The psychological impact would be enormous. The experience, a silent, suffocating darkness, perhaps accompanied by a flash of burning UV and the collapse of noise, would be indelibly stamped on the collective memory of humanity. For years to come, people would recount where they were when the air disappeared. In the aftermath, scientists would scramble to understand what happened. Was it a freak cosmic event, an unknown natural phenomenon, or something more nefarious? Expeditions would be launched to assess the damage, meteorologists to study atmospheric changes, biologists to chronicle the effects on wildlife, engineers to measure the losses and damages in buildings, vehicles, and infrastructure. Insurance companies would see a tidal wave of claims, cars crumpled in sudden accidents, homes damaged by the abrupt pressure drop, planes forced into emergency landings. Scattered across the globe, first responders would tackle an unprecedented series of emergencies, from fires that extinguished and then reignited, to hospitals dealing with patients suffering thanks to a fleeting absence of inhalable air. Economists might estimate the cost in trillions, but the psychological trauma would resist easy measurement. Artists, writers, and philosophers would explore the meaning of such an event, seeing in it an allegory for the fragility of our existence. The knowledge that the substance of life could disappear, even if only for 5 seconds, would linger in every subsequent breath. Schools and universities would add new chapters to textbooks. Physics and chemistry courses would use the 5-second disappearance as a case study for the importance of oxygen in all life and matter. History books would enshrine it as a defining event, referring to it simply as the pause. If the pause occurred during nighttime, cities would temporarily lose their electric lights as power plants relying on combustion faltered. Those below decks on submarines, in underground mines, or space capsules would panic as airlocks hissed and alarms screamed of depressurization. A secondary wave of panic might grip the world, for even after the air returned, many would fear its sudden loss again. Mask sales would skyrocket. All manner of inventive breathing apparatuses would be sold in markets, as people tried to prepare for another vanishing. Politicians would be forced to act. International organizations would convene emergency meetings. Scientists would debate new strategies for atmospheric monitoring, seeking to prevent such a catastrophe in the future. Religions might interpret the event in spiritual terms, a warning, a sign, or a lesson about the interconnectedness of life, Sermons and songs would be written about the breath of life, and rituals would spring up to commemorate the moment the earth held its breath. On a personal level, the 5 seconds would remind each inhabitant of Earth of their vulnerability, their dependence on unseen forces. Children, elders, and everyone in between would share stories of fear and awe. The act of breathing, so automatic, so unappreciated, would become a moment of mindful gratitude. The long-term effects would include a global refocusing on environmental stewardship. The link between breathable air and life itself would be made unforgettably clear, catalyzing movements for cleaner air, sustainable practices, and international cooperation on environmental protection. A generation later, the memory might start to fade, but the lessons would endure, etched not only in history books, but in the quiet, unconscious moments when we pause to breathe. Scientists would harness the event as a rallying point for studying and safeguarding the atmosphere, ensuring that the air we rely on is never again taken for granted. Through art, storytelling, and collective memory, the 5 seconds would become a symbol. It would serve as a reminder that the invisible is vital and that every moment, every molecule matters. It would likely lead to innovations in emergency response, air filtration, and atmospheric science, as the world learned anew the importance of the breath of life. As with all seismic events in history, the disappearance of oxygen for 5 seconds would reveal the fragility and resilience of life on this planet. In the silence, in the darkness, and in the sudden, gasping return to normalcy, humanity would find both fear and hope. The pause would unite the world, if only for a breath, in the knowledge that some things, though unseen, are truly indispensable.